On October the 13th, leader of the federal Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, spoke with media in Vancouver about his party's plans to tackle the high cost of living by helping Canadians bring home powerful paychecks should Canadians elect a Conservative government in the next election. I'm standing here in front of Canada Place shortly after that press conference concluded to bring you a report about questions I posed to Mr. Poilievre about something else many of you think should be tackled, and that is the millions of taxpayer dollars Canada is sending to a Hamas-linked agency, and also the Canadian government's hypocrisy when it comes to how pro-Hamas terror protests are treated in Canada compared to what happened to the loud but peaceful Freedom Convoy.
To make sure the police enforce the law by investigating and charging anyone who provides money, organization, or other support to help Hamas carry out terrorist attacks against civilians or anyone else.
Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News, and the surprise Hamas terrorist attack on Israel has claimed the lives of over 1,300 Jewish people, many of whom were civilians, women, children, and elderly. So does it make any sense then that the Canadian government will continue to provide millions of dollars to UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees that on multiple occasions has had some of their facilities caught aiding Hamas terrorists by providing space for them to store their weapons of attack? Earlier today, I asked Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre whether or not Canadian taxpayers could expect for such funding to end if his party were to form government. In the last 4 years, Canada has committed $90 million worth of support to UNRWA aid, an organization that in the past has been linked to Hamas terrorists' use to store missiles and other weapons intended to harm Israeli people in UNRWA schools and hospitals. On Tuesday, the Government of Canada announced it will be continuing with millions of dollars of funds and aid, claiming they will ensure none of that will go to aiding Hamas. If your party is to form government, will you commit to ending funds to the Hamas-linked UNRWA organization?
We will end all foreign aid to terrorists, dictators, and wasteful multinational bureaucracies. One of my first actions as Prime Minister will be to carry out a full review of every dollar we send out of this country to make sure that we stop giving money to terrorists, dictators, and useless Marxist international bureaucracies. That will be at the top of my foreign policy list. We're going to bring our money home to Canada and take care of our people in this country.
Now, as I'm filming this report, it's the morning of a uniquely troubling Friday the 13th, where Jewish people in Vancouver and across the country are not just continuing to grieve the loss of their people slain by Hamas. Some of them have opted to go into hiding in Canada. Some have kept their children home from Jewish schools today. They've hired extra security for their buildings and businesses and have welcomed police presence outside of their synagogues and community centers, all because today is expected to be a day of rage after former Hamas terrorist leader Khalid Massal released a global call for just that. As I'm filming this, it's too early to tell how many pro-Hamas individuals in Canada will take up the call. But in the past week, we have seen pro-Hamas rallies popping up across the country, including in Vancouver. So while I had his ear, I decided to ask Poilievre a question many of you who were outraged about how Canada's Freedom Convoy protesters were treated like terrorists from the government and their media would like to hear. I have another question about the pro-Hamas protests that have been taking place. We've been seeing them across the nation pop up, including in Vancouver. And as you mentioned about the Day of Rage that's planned for today, we also see that more are scheduled, including in Vancouver, with little to no consequence for organizers or attendees. In contrast, as you well know, when everyday Canadians gathered in front of our parliament to oppose things like vaccine mandates in the Freedom Convoy, the Emergencies Act was invoked to crush their protest as well as to freeze bank accounts, etc.
If your party forms government, what will it do to ensure that such an egregious double standard doesn't take place for who has the right to protest in our country?
That's a very good question, an excellent question, in fact. Justin Trudeau's and the NDP's imposition of the Emergencies Act to crush the civil liberties of Canadian citizens was one of the most despicable acts we've seen under his government. I will ensure that never happens again. I will protect people's freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and freedom of expression. We will make Canada the freest country in the world. And at the same time, I will exercise my freedom to condemn anyone who celebrates the murder of little babies, of grandmothers, the rape of mothers that has unfolded in the Middle East because of the evil of Hamas. No Canadian should stand with an evil, sadistic, terrorist death cult like Hamas. People are free to have their own opinions, but I'm free to condemn those opinions as a citizen myself. And we also know that under the law, Hamas is a terrorist enterprise. It's criminal to provide material support to Hamas. So I want to make sure the police enforce the law by investigating and charging anyone who provides money, organization, or other support to help Hamas carry out terrorist attacks against civilians or anyone else.
So what do you think? Were those answers good enough for you to elect a Conservative government? Let us know in the comments. Drea Humphrey for Rebel News. Did you know that my colleagues Avi Yemini and Benji have their boots on the ground in Israel right now to bring you reports you can trust about the atrocities committed by Hamas and Israel's war in response to them? To see those reports and to help cover the cost to bring you them, which includes security for both Avi and Benji, please go to our special website called thetruthaboutthewar.com.